This is a video about other videos, which is a little peculiar, I'll admit. I want to share with you 3 talks that aren't specifically about writing, but have ideas or takeaways that will help you with your writing. All of these talks are freely available on YouTube. I will have links to them in the video description. Let's start with the first one, Creativity and Management by John Cleese. This is probably my favorite talk of all time, and based on the view count that it has compared to a lot of other talks, a lot of people don't seem to know that it exists. Not only is this talk just really funny because it's by John Cleese, but there's also some really good information presented here. This talk is all about how to come up with creative solutions to your problems and just being more creative in general. Cleese argues, and uses research to back it up, that creativity is not some innate talent, but rather a way of operating. There is a process and a methodology for becoming creative, and more creative people tend to use that process. He describes in practical and useful detail some methods for increasing your creativity and getting your brain into a mode where you're more apt to come up with creative solutions. While this talk is mainly focused on sort of workplace creativity, a lot of what is presented here applies to writing. I've used this method before when plotting or outlining, and it's been really useful to me. If you encounter writer's block or you're having trouble coming up with ideas, some of what's presented in this talk might help you out. If nothing else, you'll walk away with a fresh new perspective on what it means to be creative and where creativity comes from. Next up is How to Achieve Your Most Ambitious Goals by Stephen Dunier? One of those pronunciations is bound to be correct. I'm honestly not a huge fan of TED Talks. I find most of the time the titles tend to overpromise and the talks tend to underdeliver. This one does, though, have some interesting ideas that really apply to writing. The method described here to achieve large, complex goals basically boils down to 2 steps. First is to break any large task into a series of many smaller tasks. This will make the task less overwhelming and will break it down into things that you can more easily accomplish. The second step is to choose to work on these little pieces of your goal more often than you don't. These sort of incremental changes, the decision to work on your goal rather than working on something else, will eventually lead you to accomplishing your goal, so long as you choose to work on the thing rather than spending time sitting on the couch. This advice applies quite well to writing. A novel is a lot of work and can seem overwhelming, but if you take that large and complex and difficult goal and break it down into smaller pieces, it becomes much more manageable. Writing an entire novel is really hard, but writing a single chapter out of that novel is way easier. Writing a single paragraph is even easier than that. If instead of thinking about writing an entire novel, you instead think about writing a single chapter or, say, 500 words of that novel, then it's going to seem way less overwhelming. And once you've broken this big task into many smaller tasks, it's much easier to sit down for short bursts of time and work your way through them. Do this for long enough and you'll eventually achieve your goal. The third and last talk I want to share with you is Too Busy to Learn Blender by Andrew Price. I'm leaning heavily into the whole these talks have nothing to do with writing thing here, but hear me out. For those of you who don't know, Blender is a 3D modeling software that's used for making assets for movies or video games, that sort of thing. This talk is obviously targeted towards people who are trying to learn that software, but there's a lot of great information presented here that applies to any form of art, including writing. I won't go into too much detail about what's covered in the talk because it's fairly short and I don't want to spoil it. But the things he talks about, like putting in small amounts of time every day or setting deadlines, are things that 100% will help you with your writing. If you're struggling to find time to write, or if there are things distracting you from writing, then this video is likely to help you out a lot. So there you have it, 3 talks that aren't about writing but will help you as a writer. As I mentioned at the beginning, all these talks are linked in the video description. If you enjoyed this content and would like to see more of it, please subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Wednesday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.